Economists are predicting the federal deficit will grow, but the Ipsos polling shows 7 in 10 Canadians believe it's important for the government to maintain a balanced budget without running a deficit.
7 in 10 Canadians demand that the federal government starts to focus on their standard of living as its number one priority. Will the Liberal government listen? And are Canadians prepared to take it to the polls? If not. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. The Carney government is getting set to deliver a budget for the first time in almost 2 years from the Liberal government. Of course, many people around the world feel that this is going to be a disastrous budget. Many Canadians feel that it will not meet the needs that they are looking for. Many of the opposition parties say that the Liberal government is refusing flat out to talk to them, to deal with them, to negotiate with them in any way, shape, or form. Now, all of that would be bad enough, except for that there are other circumstances and other indicators that not only is the Carney government letting us down and not being transparent with the situation, but the provincial governments are throwing on and piling on. Let's get into this. Of course, the mainstream media in Canada is back to this. It's not Mark Carney's fault. It's all Pierre Poilievre's fault for some reason. And that if Pierre Poilievre doesn't support Mark Carney, the problem isn't that Mark Carney's decisions and his rulemaking are horrible. It's not that there's been 11 years of steady decline underneath the Liberal government. No. It's because the Conservatives want you to live a better lifestyle, and how dare they say that out loud. Now, we all know that the CBC and the CTV and all of the rest of them have no real love for the conservative side of the aisle, primarily because their bosses also have no love for the conservative side of the aisle. However, there are other media outlets around the world saying things that I have been saying from the very beginning, and I'll pick this one here called The Guardian. All links will be in the description. Canada's Liberal Party says budget of sacrifice needed to avoid recession. Now, I know that they're not saying that word in the mainstream media in Canada, but they are absolutely saying it in the right circles because we are in steady decline, because we have had, the Liberals had to redefine the word recession and then rely heavily on people swallowing that. Of course, most people didn't understand what the term meant in the first place, and so it was easy for them to say, oh, we're not actually in a recession. That's just Pierre Poilievre, using the technical jargon to try to overwhelm you. But the fact of the matter is that our economy has been in decline. I think it's 11 straight quarters, and the government, of course, throws money into the civil service, and they try to make it seem like it's something that it's not. And housing expenses rise because the cost of food goes up, because the cost of rent goes up, because the cost of electricity goes up, like in the case of Ontario. And as a result, even though households are living at less standard of living, it looks like they're spending more. And so the statistics people just say, oh, look, spending is up. But in reality, it's not expenses, it's costs. It's things they need to maintain their day-to-day, and they're letting go and missing out on other things, or running their credit up a little bit too higher than they can afford, again, enriching the same very people who are against the pragmatic approaches of the conservative fiscal management. Well, let's take a look at the first paragraph of this. Canada's ruling Liberal Party has said a budget of sacrifice is required to confront both a trade war with the U.S. and a protracted cost of living crisis that threatens to push the country into a recession. But with the opposition party signaling they won't support the fiscal plans of the Prime Minister Mark Carney, a failed parliamentary vote on the budget could plunge the country into another federal election in the coming weeks. A couple of things I want to take away from there. A protracted cost of living crisis, meaning it's been going on for a long time. So it's not the fact that the Liberal government is going to cause this problem. It's the fact that the Liberal government has already caused this problem. And this budget is not going to change that. Repeating the same processes of what's been going on over and over and over again for the last 11 years, it's not going to work this time. Trying to tell yourself that you're going to put up all this environmental regulation, you're going to put up all these barriers to investment, then try to convince people that it's all about the trade, when really it's not about the trade, it's about internal investment. You'll note that you don't see Donald Trump worrying about trade. He puts up the barriers and then he focuses on what he can do inside of his own country. The barriers exist, but our government is not focusing on what they can do inside of our own country. Yeah, a couple of projects here and there, like just lip service really to full focus and concentration on the development of our nation, on the development of our infrastructure, on the development of this country to make it an economic powerhouse. It's going to cause You got to cut down some trees. You're going to have to bend some blades of grass. You're going to have to do things that are going to make the people who glue themselves to the road go crazy. Of course, that's Mark Carney, right? That's Julie DeBruzen. That's Stephen Guilbeault. All of these individuals are these kinds of people that would glue themselves to the road. Where 20 years ago, I mean, Stephen Guilbeault climbed a bridge, climbed the CN Tower, ran up on some lady's house and terrified her for the whole day. You don't think if it was happening right now, he wouldn't be gluing himself to some sort of a road or throwing paint on something? These are extremists, and they are not the people. The people that got us into this mess are not the people that are going to get us out of this mess. A recession is serious business. And I'm glad finally somebody is saying it out loud, besides me, that is. Global News employed Ipsos to run a poll on the actual thoughts of Canadians on our current standard of living and our current financial concerns.
And exclusive Ipsos polling for Global News shows that pitch is also not landing with many Canadians.
They don't personally want to sacrifice. In fact, they want to see their own standard of living and their month-to-month costs, day-to-day costs, improve, running the government better and more efficiently, and reducing their taxes. They would rather see that.
According to the recent polling, Canadians' top priorities for the budget are help with everyday expenses at 42%, lower personal taxes at 32%, followed by reduced overall government spending at 27%, and action to mitigate U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs.
Before we hear the rest of this polling statistics, let's just concentrate on the first two here and tell ourselves that 42% want help with daily expenses, and lowering taxes would help with daily expenses, so that we can say that 74% of Canadians want our money to be a better response. Now, if the Liberal government's going to try to tell you that all you have to do is sacrifice more, and somehow in the distant future, after they have enriched all of their very close personal friends, it's going to magically trickle down to you in this high density nightmare that they have planned out for your future. And I tell you, Canadians, you should have thought of this back in February and April. You should have thought of this, because now we are staring down the barrel of hardships. It's not going to be an easy turnaround, but we could have been 7 months ahead of the game had we stopped looking at how much we dislike Donald Trump and started looking at the reality. Now, I'm not blaming you. I'm trying to get you to appreciate that this time you have to think your way through it, that you may have made a poor error in judgment and trusted that the Liberal government was somehow going to get you through. But now we can see that they are not going to get you through, and that the best solution is to get jobs, is to create jobs. We got all kinds of wealth in this country. Why should we allow Mark Carney and his close personal friends to capitalize while the rest of us do without, while the rest of us sit around wondering if it's going to be okay tomorrow with our children, or tomorrow are we ever going to find a place to live, while the youngsters in our country get totally ignored and overrun and told to live in their mother's basement and then mocked for living in their mother's basement. And as it turns out, their mother's actually getting a lot of pressure because the property taxes have gone up through the roof and she's on a fixed income. I mean, the Liberal government is not the solution to these problems. The Liberal government is actually the cause of these problems. And 74% of Canadians agree with what I'm trying to tell you. 74% of Canadians realize that it's time that we focused on getting the lives of Canadians better before we worry about the whole wide world and all that stuff you hear coming out of the Liberal government, new world trading order and all the rest of that stuff.
Economists are predicting the federal deficit will grow, but the Ipsos polling shows 7 in 10 Canadians believe it's important for the government to maintain a balanced budget without running a deficit. And 6 in 10 say Canada wouldn't need deficit spending if the government were better managed.
6 in 10 agree that we wouldn't need deficit spending if the government were better managed. So at least the Canadians have come around. Now they understand what they're up against. There's no reason to be talking about, dental care and all the kinds of foolishness that you hear coming out of the Liberal government, free birth control. Those things are targeted at just trying to get a very specific section of the population to vote for them. But reality check, guys. We need houses. We need cheap food. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are more important than the rest of it. It's easy to get your teeth fixed when you got a lot of money. It's easy to get birth control when you have the ability to afford it. Now, I'll be completely candid with you. Birth control is covered already. So the way that they made the rules kind of just speaks to how they are targeting certain segments of society and certain cultures that are in Canada. And I will leave that for a different video. But balanced budget and appropriate spending, they could be throwing money around left, right, and center if they would just get out of the way of the development of the oil, the development of the mining, the development of the steel. Just get out of the way. Just move aside and let somebody that knows what they're doing fix it, who's not driven by ideology and who's not driven by self-interest, right? Because that's something that we have to consider when we talk about all of these people who are in close personal circles with the Liberal government. I mean, every time I turn around, the scandal centers around the Liberal government's friends getting wealthy. So, I mean, the list of that is pretty long. Or the Liberal government trying to impact the criminal justice system for their friends. I mean, we can see that there's no impartiality in the Liberal government, and that seems to be something that is prevalent on the left side of the aisle. Canadians, we need a better standard of living, but we also need a country that doesn't allow for that. We need a country that's impartial. We need a country that chooses to treat you not from where you're from, not what color your skin is, not what your religion is, not what sex you are identified at birth. Nope. We need to know that if you're inside Canada, you're treated the same no matter what. That you are treated identical no matter what. One set of rules for everybody. That is going to be the single fastest way that we can get this country back on track. That we can set our culture. And the Liberals have spent 10 years wrecking it. So I guess in some sense, in some respect, they've done us a little bit of a favor that way. There are a couple of things coming out of Ontario that is being overlooked by the mainstream media. And I believe that this one is kind of important. It speaks to the fact that Doug Ford doesn't really care what you're going through. He has no idea. He has no comprehension of how to maintain what little bit of stability that we do have. Say goodbye to rent control, indefinite leases if Ontario passes housing proposal advocates. Province says consultations underway as it aims to protect tenants while supporting landlords. Now, those landlords are going to be the corporate kind. Ontario's planned new housing legislation could open the door to ending rent control and indefinite leases across the province. Advocates warn after a recent proposal by Premier Doug Ford's government. The Ford government introduced a new housing bill on Thursday that says it would streamline approvals and let developers build homes more quickly. When you're building homes in southern Ontario, when you're talking about building homes in Toronto, you're talking about these monstrosities of high rises that cost millions of dollars to build. They oftentimes try to sell it to you 2-3 years. There's not even a shovel in the ground. They're trying to get you to dig out a mortgage on it. It's just absurd. It's ridiculous. And there's all kinds of problems inside of that system. However, it takes a lot of money. And so it's always a conglomerate. It's always a corporation. And what they want to do, well, here you'll hear. But buried in the legislation is a proposal for alternative options to lease expiry rules that could allow landlords to control who occupies their units and for how long, including through adjustments to rental arrangements based on market conditions, personal needs, or business strategies, according to the province's brief slides on Thursday. What that means, that's just a fancy way of saying whoever's the landlord has the right to decide when you can live there and when you can't. Now, indefinite leases is something that absolutely should not be on the table. You made the deal and you're staying there, and there are rules for these landlords to get their rent increases, and there are rules for these rent evictions, these reno evictions. There are rules. The landlords in this country cannot be allowed to turn Canada into any of 100 places I can list around the world. They're not going to turn, every time we turn around, you're going to be living in terror from the landlord that they're going to be able to throw you out on a whim. They don't even have to give you an excuse. Oh, he got a new girlfriend. He needs your apartment. Out you go. Oh, he decided that you looked at him sideways. Oh, out you go. Oh, they decided that if they evict you, they can raise the rent by $300. Out you go. And you got nowhere to go. You got nowhere to land. And Doug Ford should be aware of that. Doug Ford should understand that one of the single largest influences on inflation is rent. And 49% of the city of Toronto rent. So imagine in your mind the kind of money that we're talking about. Imagine the kind of impact that this ridiculous concept has. They'll say to you, well, rent control, we had to get rid of it because nobody was building rentals anymore. And if we didn't get rid of it, people weren't building rentals. And I said back, you know what happens is people buy these terrible condos, then they rent it out. So there's lots of ways that they can get rentals into the system. If the corporations, what we need to be looking at is not allowing the corporations in, indicating to me that if we could just get a guy to build 5 or 6 houses, we'd start to make a little bit, we'd have a housing market. But of course, Toronto, they want to put everything up 555, stories in the air. And then they want to just cram it in as tightly as possible. It's a 2-bedroom apartment with 15 people living in it. And then they try to tell themselves that you can evict them anytime you want. And there's no control on the rent. So even if you don't evict them, you can raise it up through the roof. This is not a way to maintain inflation. This is not a way to maintain a standard of living. And we have to focus on the idea that one of the base needs that we have as people mentally, psychologically, is food and rent. And those things have to be a priority to the federal government, to the provincial government, to the municipal government. They have to be put first, not the corporations that try to come in and build it. And if they don't want to come in and build it, it's fine. We'll find other people to build it. The government can build it. The government can use building it as a training exercise. The government can do all of the same thing. We don't need these corporations because these corporations act like governments. These corporations act like they're outside of the law. Then they take all of this money that they've earned, and like in the case of Mark Carney's businesses, and they run down into the United States so they don't even give the taxes back to the system. This is a horrible idea, and I get that the Conservatives in Ontario have a majority, but it seems to me that they are no longer protecting the people on the ground. They are now protecting their corporate friends. And so are they really Conservatives, or are they just Conservative in name only? Another company is leaving Canada, moving all of its operations down into the United States. Ontario furniture manufacturer Halseg to close and relocate to the U.S. Up to 130 jobs will be lost as furniture manufacturer Halseg Canada will shutter its facility in Lindsay, Ontario in March of 2026. The parent company, based in Orem, Utah, announced earlier this month that the operations in the heart of Kawartha Lakes will be consolidated with the U.S. facilities. Now, there's a lot of stuff there. I'd like to point out a couple of things. CEO says the move comes after a comprehensive review of the company's global operations and reflects macroeconomics and operational realities. We'll come back to that. However, with the challenges of fluctuating tariffs, shifting trade policies, rising costs, combined with the challenging sales environment and sustained pressure on profitability, we must consolidate operations to ensure long-term strength of our business. Now, that last section should be a wake-up call to everybody out there, because that's what every single solitary individual that's looking after his company is going to be saying to himself. Words like that. Consolidate operations for long-term strength of our business, challenging sales environment, sustained pressure on profitability. Not, oh, Trump, not, oh, Carney, not, oh, liberals, not, oh, Greenpeace, not none of that stuff. They don't care about any of that. They want to make money. That's all they care about. And of course, we're talking about what's really bizarre in my mind, that this furniture, one of the primary needs of furniture is timber. And we have a lot of it in Canada. And yet these guys are still seeing that it's cheaper to buy their timber down in the United States of America. So they're going to move 130 jobs out of Canada and then bring it back up into Canada, tariff free essentially, because the Mark Carney government won't be able to impose tariffs, because then all of a sudden the company won't decide to just won't bring it into the country. This is the problem, guys. It's not that these guys are telling themselves that they're going to take these 130 jobs. I mean, this factory's been here like 40 years or something. They're going to take these 130 jobs and zip down into the United States. They're going down there because it's better to ensure their long-term strength of their business. It's cheaper is what that means. It's cheaper. They can get rid of the plant. It'll sit there as an empty building, which becomes a tax write-off in Canada. The 130 people that are going to lose their jobs, it's just a cost of doing business. And then they're going to move all of this industry, this development, down into the United States to a facility where they will be able to pay the individuals a third shift to manufacture to pick up the additional workload. On top of all of that, they will be able to bring their corporate taxes down, their land and property taxes down, the amount of environmental watchdogs that they have to do for the sawdust that might be coming out of their manufacturing. The list of reasons to move it down into the United States is not because of a tariff. It's because of the environment of business friendly that the Donald Trump government is, and that the Liberal government is not. And they're not going to become business friendly overnight. Mark Carney has proven that if it's his business and him and his friends get impacted directly, then he will all of a sudden put them on a list of 5 to get special treatment. But everybody else, you got to beg, you got to scrape, you got to sit in there in your little high density and dream about what it would have been like to have a government that was friendly to business. And this is a great example. How rather than give them the corporate tax breaks and to release those 9 laws so that they will stay where they are, nope. They just push it and pressured, and these guys decided to pull out their calculator and said, okay, it's just cheaper this way. And if we can't put the furniture back into Canada, oh, well, so be it. That doesn't mean anything in the long term, because we have a lot more people in the United States that are willing to buy our furniture than we do in Canada. And most of the Canadians that are tradesmen and that have skills are going to be moving to the United States anyway, because the economy in Canada is so bad, there are no jobs. Oh, yeah, no. Yeah. This is a great situation that we're looking at. What we need to see from this is that the Mark Carney government is not what they claim to be and not what they promise to be. The economic situation in Canada is dire, and we are moving ever so close to becoming a country that needs to be bailed out from the US, ironically enough, or the International Monetary Fund. When the Mark Carney government talks to you about how it has to be his way or the highway, you should be telling yourself that the highway is a better way. You should be telling yourself that he needs you more than you need him. He is in a position right now to exercise his authority and do, stroke of the pen. However, you are the one that is actually living the day to day, and it's you and your friends and your family members and all of the people around you, your community, that are ones that speak to the true power of this nation. We are the people, and we are the ones that decide what happens. We are the ones that speak through our vote, and we want a country. I get that it's all fine and dandy to talk about keeping everything nice and green until the wolves are at the door. Now, this system has failed. Mark Carney's essentially the only guy that's still desperately clinging to it, and we have to for our own best interests, we have to tell ourselves that it's better to perhaps adopt the policies of the Alberta when instead of targeting 2030, start targeting 2050 and start telling ourselves that we can get there if we just go a little bit slower, and we won't have to go hungry. We won't have to deal with that. We won't have to watch as our children can't go after school programs because the Liberal government has made it impossible for you to get a job. And what job you do get, you're paying nearly 60% of that money into taxes that the government is actually wasting and not getting anything done with. So if the government's budget comes and we tell ourselves that we're facing another election, okay, it'll be a little bit of a problem and it'll be kind of a pain in the butt. I don't believe it'll happen because the NDP is not in any position, not prepared. The NDP's base is desperately waiting for them to put a foot forward that makes them look like something that they used to look like before Jagmeet Singh destroyed it. And if we wait until the spring, then we are absolutely going to be due to knock the Liberal government off, because many of the people that currently support the Liberal government are regretting that and would prefer to support the Bloc or would prefer to support the NDP, including many of the unions. And so it's a little bit of a tightrope, but that's neither here nor there. What we have to do, what you and I as Canadians have to realize, is that no matter what political stripe they tell themselves, no matter what party they tell themselves, they have to have a policy that we agree with. And right now, that policy is cheap food, cheap rent, good job. It doesn't matter. The rest of it can all be pushed away to the side. I don't want to hear about the environmental stuff. I don't want to hear about how we're sending $1 billion over to Ukraine and $1 billion to help gender fluid training down in whatever country. I mean, I get that they might need some money, but let's fix our own property first, and then we can start to help those people. Because right now, any nickel that we send out of this country will not help you and I, will not help this nation. And this nation has to come first. We have to stop telling ourselves that we're in some sort of globalist agenda, some sort of globalist fantasy, and realize that what matters is what's happening right here on the ground between me and you and all around us. Nationalism is the way of the world, and nationalism is what we have to focus on. And when we have gotten our economy stable, when we have gotten our standard of life stable, when we have gotten to the point where we can look around and say, hey, there's a little bit of money in the bank and our government is not out of spending control, then we can start to tell ourselves that we need to send some money to some of these desperate countries, or better yet, we need to export our philosophy to these countries and help them rebuild in a new image. That's just my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.